Aloha everyone, this is Dr. Michael Salla with exopolitics.org, and I'm just releasing the latest article on my Exopolitics website, and the title is Assange expected to confirm source of Wikileaks DNC emails was Seth Rich, not Russians. So the article is based on the recent arrest of Julian Assange, and he basically has brought back the narrative that the Democratic National Committee, the email server was hacked not by Russia but by Seth Rich, who worked at the DNC, and he was upset about how Bernie Sanders was being systematically undermined during the 2016 primaries by the Democratic National Committee. So according to this narrative, Rich communicated with Assange and handed over the DNC emails through the Wikileaks secure online Dropbox. So Assange first hinted on June 12, 2016 in an interview that he had more of the missing emails from Hillary Clinton's private email servers when she was Secretary of State. At the time, there was a lot of discussion, and Trump had brought up during the campaign that there were 30,000 missing emails that she had not supplied to the Department of State, which were being cleared and released. And so Assange created quite a stir during the campaign, saying that, well, we have more emails in relationship to Hillary Clinton, and so that was something that led to speculation that, well, maybe he hacked or got a witness or whistleblower to submit some of the missing emails. So 2 days after Assange's announcement, a computer security company, CrowdStrike, published a report that the Democratic National Committee email service had been hacked by Russia. And basically this was something that was quickly embraced by the mainstream media, and it was predicated on the idea that the emails that WikiLeaks had and was about to release, these had been attained through hacking by Russia, and that's how they ended up with WikiLeaks. So here's how the Washington Post's Ellen Nakashima had to say on June 14, 2016. Quote, Russian government hackers penetrated the computer network of the Democratic National Committee and gained access to the entire database of opposition research on GOP presidential candidate Donald Trump, according to the committee officials and security experts who responded to the breach, end quote. However, there were major problems with this company CrowdStrike being a competent and impartial investigation into the alleged Russian hacking. And people were asking the question, well, if the DNC committee email servers had been hacked, then why was this private company doing the investigation and not the FBI? Why wasn't the FBI given access? So these were questions that were being asked, and one particular blog site brought up this problem. The Nakamura, really that was Nakashima piece, marked the first salvo, this is the quote, in the Russian hacking meme, but the claim was not backed up by independently verified forensic evidence. It rested solely on the conclusion of a computer security company, CrowdStrike. The pro-Ukrainian politics of CrowdStrike's founder, Dmitry Alberovich, and his strident opposition to Russia cast a pall of bias over the findings of CrowdStrike. No US federal law enforcement official or agency was given access to the DNC servers. Neither the FBI nor Homeland Security was permitted to examine the servers and the alleged evidence of a hack. So, that's a pretty important observation right there, that this company, CrowdStrike, was run by a pro-Ukrainian politician, Dmitry Alberovich. And it showed that this was no impartial assessment of what had happened. It was a company that had an agenda, and that agenda was anti-Russia. And in the 2019 best-selling book by Don Bongino, a former Secret Service officer, titled Spygate, the attempted sabotage of Donald Trump, he pointed out, the many flaws with CrowdStrike doing an investigation on this this alleged hacking of the DNC server, and the puzzling decision to deny the FBI access to the hacked server. I mean, he brought up the obvious point. Well, if the DNC server had been hacked illegally by Russia, and this was given over to WikiLeaks, then having the FBI investigate this hacking and this crime would have actually helped the DNC, bring the perpetrators to justice, and also show just what was going on, and bring them to heel. But no, that didn't happen at all. There was no crime that the FBI was allowed to pursue here. It was just told that the servers had been hacked, and the FBI was not given access to the allegedly hacked servers. So almost a month after Assange's interview, that WikiLeaks had more Clinton emails and was vetting them for eventual release, Seth Rich was murdered on July 10 in very strange circumstances. Many people are aware of this, but basically he was shot in the back several times, but none of his valuables were taken. So nearly 2 weeks later, on July 22nd, WikiLeaks dumped 20,000 DNC emails on its website. So these were basically covering what was going on behind the scenes in the Democratic National Committee. A July 25, 2016 story published in Vox covered the WikiLeaks DNC dump and showed that the DNC favoured the Clinton campaign over Bernie Sanders. And in November 2017, a year later, Donna Brazil, the former chair of the DNC, confirmed that the DNC had systematically supported Clinton over Sanders. So, Brazil's admission was pretty important because it provided a solid foundation for understanding what motivated Rich to leak the DNC emails to WikiLeaks in the first place. And so, right there you have, an agenda or a clear intent as to why Rich did what he did. He was very upset over Bernie Sanders being denied fair treatment by the DNC, and so he obviously wanted to leak this information, hoping maybe that by doing so, the Clinton, there would be kind of more impartiality exercised by the DNC. In August 2016, a Dutch television crew show interviewed Julian Assange, and Assange hinted that Rich's murder was related to the DNC emails. He did it in an indirect way. I mean, I watched the interview like many others at the time, and it was clear that Assange was wanting to maintain this policy that while WikiLeaks doesn't name their sources, and so he kind of like skirted around the question of whether or not Rich was the source for the WikiLeaks release of the DNC emails, but nevertheless strongly hinted at it. In the interview, Assange said, "Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material and often significant risks. There was a 27-year-old that works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered, for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington." So right there, Assange is connecting the WikiLeaks release to Rich. The host of the show said that was just a robbery, wasn't it? I mean, that was the mainstream narrative. But Assange said, no, there's no finding. And the host said, well, what are you suggesting? Assange, I'm suggesting that our sources take risks and they become concerned to see things like that occurring. So right there, Assange was strongly hinting at Rich being the source of the WikiLeaks release of the DNC emails. And Assange and WikiLeaks actually went on to point out that, to show the connection to Rich and their release by actually offering a reward of $20,000. This was the first time WikiLeaks had done this, as far as I can recall, offering a reward for information leading to conviction of a murder. And so this only really fueled the rumours that Seth Rich was the source for the WikiLeaks release. So those who claimed Rich was responsible for the release of the DNC emails were vilified at the time. WikiLeaks has a story summarising what happened, and this is what they said. Fact-checking websites like PolitiFact, Snopes.com and FactChecks.org stated that these theories were false and unfounded. The New York Times, Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post wrote that the promotion of these conspiracy theories was an example of fake news. So right there you have it, that anyone saying that Seth Rich was the source for the DNC emails ending up with WikiLeaks and being released, that was fake news. Anyone suggesting that that Rich was murdered because he leaked that information, that was fake news. It was just a conspiracy theory. And so people who did put out that information, or people who investigated that information, Fox News, Sean Hannity, through his popular television and radio shows through Fox, was forced through litigation to abandon their investigation into Rich's murder. And Rich's parents led the charge, saying that this was just conspiracy theories. The WikiLeaks article went on to say Rich's parents condemned the conspiracy theorists and said that these individuals were exploiting their son's death for political gain, and their spokesperson called the conspiracy theorists disgusting sociopaths. So a story published by Fox, two Fox News reporters, Malia Zimmerman and Ed Butowski, in May 2017, was subsequently pulled from the news site, and Hannity also stopped covering it. So here you have a screenshot of the what remains where Fox once had that news story. Basically, it was just a retraction showing that the Fox News investigation into that connection between the murder of Seth Rich with the WikiLeaks release, that was pulled because of insufficient information. So the alternative news media, so that was the Fox News retracting the story. Now, a little bit later, Kuhnon emerges on the scene in October 2017. Seth Rich is mentioned in several posts, alluding to his role as the true source for the WikiLeaks DNC links. So there's, in my article on my website, there's a link there where you can find the Q posts. There's at least 3 of them explicitly referring to Seth Rich and hinting that he was murdered as a result of a hit by MS-13 criminal gang related to the Clinton family, and so certainly quite controversial, but that is definitely something that QAnon raised, that the Rich murder was connected to these WikiLeaks DNC email leaks. So nevertheless, the alternative news media still pursued this story regardless of Fox and Hannity dropping it, and so that continued and kind of languished, though, until on October 4 there was a NSA response to a Freedom of Information Act request that showed that Rich had been in communication with Assange. In their response to the FOIA request by an attorney, Ty Clevenger, the NSA wrote, quote, "Your request has been processed under the provisions of the FOIA. 15 documents, that's 32 pages, responsive to your request have been reviewed by this agency as required by the FOIA and found to be currently and properly classified in accordance with Executive Order 13526. These documents meet the criteria for classification as set forth in subparagraph of section 1.4 and remains classified top secret and secret." End quote. Now, unfortunately, Clevenger didn't release the FOIA request that he had sent off nor the NSA response that he had been given. But nevertheless, this was communicated in a blog post that took up the information that he had received. Of course, the mainstream media didn't cover this at all. It just ignored this NSA FOIA response, and only a few alternative media sources picked up the story. One of these was an April 19 article by McCarty, and he cited this post that had been first released on October 2013 that discussed the NSA FOIA response. And this post was on a blog site called Sic Semper Tyrannis. The author was using a pseudonym, Publius Tacitus, and he addressed the issue DNC emails, a Seth attack, not a Russian hack. And so he was the first to cover this NSA FOIA response to this request by that the attorney. So he covered that, and then there was another story by McCarty about 6 months later that came out in April 29. And McCarty raised questions over the precise language used in Clevenger's FOIA request and what this meant in terms of the documents that were withheld. Because he was saying, well, what's the precise language here in the FOIA request and what the NSA wrote back. In his article, he pointed out that many of these questions were finally resolved by William Binney in an April 17 interview. And McCarty's article said, quote, Ty Clevenger has FOIA'd information from NSA asking for any data that involved both Seth Rich and also Julian Assange. And they responded by saying, we've got 15 files, 32 pages, but they're all classified in accordance with Executive Order 13526 covering classification, and therefore you can't have them. That says that the NSA has records of communication between Seth Rich and Julian Assange. I mean, that's the only business that NSA is in, copying communications between people and devices, end quote. So, there's a video with the entire interview involving William Binney, where he talks about this. Definitely worth listening to. But basically, Binney was confirming that this email, that this FOIA response received by Ty Clevenger, that was actually outlining communications between Seth Rich and Wikipedia and Assange that the NSA had intercepted, and that these were classified. These were not being released because they still had a secret or top secret security classification. So this is quite astounding in terms of this whole story about whether or not Seth Rich had released had actually sent all these DNC emails to WikiLeaks through its secure Dropbox, rather than it all being hacked by the Russians. So Binney's interpretation really shows that the single issue that has dominated the analysis of the 2016 presidential election, that Russia was hacked, that Russia hacked the DNC and interfered with the integrity of the US elections by passing this on, that this was all nonsense. And the nearly 2-year Mueller investigation into the Trump collusion with Russia, which generated reams of anti-Trump and anti-Russia stories in the mainstream media, that this was all a fabrication, that the Russians hadn't hacked the DNC email servers at all. Both Trump and Russia were vilified by a hostile media that was anxious to promote the Russia hacking narrative and ridiculing anyone suggesting that Rich was the true source of the DNC info being released to WikiLeaks, not Russia. The NSA's admission is the first concrete sign that the deep state and the mainstream media are about to be exposed for willfully lying and misrepresenting the truth. Assange is all but certain to be extradited to the USA and will reveal what he knows about Rich and his connection to the DNC email dumps. While the questioning and extradition of Assange are likely to take an extended period of time, currently he's in British jails, and the British security services are no doubt interviewing him and questioning him about what he knows. There's questions that have been raised about the British intelligence community and their involvement in basically facilitating this Mueller investigation and the espionage on the Trump presidential campaign. So it can be expected, and the Q actually says that Assange is going to have a bit of a rough time in Britain because the black hats there are going to be investigating him and not really treating him that well. But eventually he'll be extradited to the US, and that's when there'll be deals cut, and Assange's testimony about what really happened will be explosive. So, while all this is being arranged, Assange being interviewed, and his extradition is worked out behind the scenes, it's worth emphasizing that the NSA has known all along about what really happened, but it kept this all silent or classified. It's not known when and how this information will be released, and whether it will be done through Assange, through the extradition, through interviews, whether it will be done through the NSA, through more FOIA releases, or some other process, maybe Q. Who knows exactly how this is all going to play out, but it appears that it is going to play out. Now, despite the knowledge of the Rich and Assange connection, the NSA and its two directors since the DNC hacking, Admiral Mike Rogers and General Paul Nakasone, who's the current director, have done very little to publicly alter the mainstream news narrative that Russia hacked the DNC servers and that Rich's murder was unrelated to the DNC documents that Wikileaks released less than 2 weeks after the murder. So, we have some obvious questions here. Why did the NSA stand by and allow the accusations of Russian hacking to grow to the extent that relations with Russia have been severely damaged, economic sanctions imposed, and a 2-year-long investigation was established into potential collusion between the Trump presidential campaign and the Russians? One answer worth exploring is that the deep state had much to fear about a potential collaboration between Trump and Putin in revealing many advanced technology secrets possessed by their respective intelligence services, secrets which President John F. Kennedy and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev unsuccessfully attempted to unlock 56 years ago, with tragic consequences for both. So this is not the first time that two leaders of the Soviet Union and the United States have tried to collaborate in ways that undermine the deep state. We saw it with Kennedy and Khrushchev, and we know what happened there. President Reagan and Gorbachev, when they began cooperating, the world changed. So now Trump wants to cooperate with Putin, and there are those, the deep state, that does not want the world to change. So in my article, there's a number of follow-up stories you can read that explores this whole Trump-Russia connection, why the deep state wants to sabotage any positive relationships between Trump and Putin. So there's some articles there that you can follow. And finally, here's a promo for my upcoming May 11 webinar, where I'm going to be talking about the US Air Force Secret Space Program and shifting extraterrestrial alliances. This is going to happen. This is probably going to be the launch, or very closely followed by the launch of my next book, the 4th book in my Secret Space Program series, which is going to be titled US Air Force Secret Space Program, Shifting Extraterrestrial Alliances and Space Force. So you've got all that to look forward to. This is Dr. Michael signing off from the big island of Hawaii. Aloha.